My heels echoed like a metronome on the polished floor. Not hurried, not hesitant, just final. Click, click, click. I didn't look back as the glass doors slid shut behind me. The boardroom stayed silent. No one followed. No one called after me. They never do, not when decisions have already been made. That evening, Carter sent out the company-wide email. Phase 1 restructure, effective immediately. We'll be optimizing the Executive Secretary Division to better align with scalable operational models. No names, no thanks, just strategy. Dressed up in buzzwords, but I knew what it meant. I was the optimization. I deleted the email without reading the rest. I've always known how to disappear without making noise. It's a skill you learn when your job isn't to be seen but to see everything. I was there when the company signed its first major client back when the lights flickered in the hallway and the coffee machine had to be kicked twice to work. I was the one who took notes when no one asked for them, remembered birthdays no one cared about, and placed water bottles before big meetings exactly where hands would reach for them. No one ever asked me how I did it. They just assumed I always knew, which, I suppose, I did. Some people listened to words. I watched the space between them. Then came Carter Vale, young, sharp, confident in the way people are when they haven't been wrong enough yet. He introduced himself to the board with phrases like real-time agility and adaptive restructuring. I watched the way his jaw clenched when someone interrupted him, the way his eyes scanned for approval before every punchline. He moved fast, thought fast, decided faster. On his second day, he removed all the wall clocks on the executive floor. Time's not something we follow, he said. It's something we shape. He never asked me what I did. Not really. He assumed. That was his first mistake. We only had one real conversation. 5 minutes. No more. He was scrolling through his tablet when I stepped into his office. You've been here a while, he said without looking up. I have your role. It's sort of floating. You're attached to multiple departments but not anchored to one. That's correct? He nodded to himself, then said, we're shifting to a leaner, tech-driven model. Smart scheduling. NLP-based negotiation tools. Most of what you do will be automated by next quarter. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I hope it works, I said. He looked up then. You're not worried? No. Why not? I held his gaze. Because memory doesn't sync to the cloud, and trust isn't programmed. There was a silence after that. Not uncomfortable, just vacant. Like someone opened a door expecting to find a storm, and only found stillness. The next morning, my access was revoked from the internal systems. My name was no longer listed on the executive portal. No meeting, no handshake. No thank you. I packed my things in under 6 minutes. There wasn't much to take. I left the orchid on the windowsill. Carter would probably throw it out, or worse, water it too much. As I walked down the corridor one last time, the glass walls caught my reflection again and again, fading with each step. It didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a transition. Carter thought my absence was a vacancy to be filled, but I wasn't filling space. I was the silence that kept everything from making noise. It started with the screens, one by one. They appeared on desks across the executive floor, sleek black tablets replacing physical calendars, paper memos, even post-it notes. The assistants were the first to go, then the receptionists, then anyone whose role included words like coordination, liaison, or administrative. The new system didn't like soft edges. It wanted precision, structure, speed. Carter called it operational streamlining. Think of it as upgrading the nervous system, he said during the town hall, his voice smooth over the microphone. We're replacing instinct with insight, real-time clarity, powered by data. People nodded, some clapped. No one asked what gets lost when instinct is removed. The new executive assistant team arrived the following Monday. They were sharp, poised, efficient, the kind of efficient that had been trained, not learned. They carried matching ultrabooks and wore the same expression, eager, polished, slightly wary. One introduced herself to me in the elevator. I don't remember her name, but I remember her saying, I can't believe they haven't switched to full automation until now. I smiled and said nothing. I've learned that silence makes some people keep talking, and others reveal more than they mean to. Then came the AI. They called it NORA, short for Neural Optimization for Resource Allocation, a scheduling system that tracked time zones, habits, even preferences. It could predict the likelihood of a meeting being canceled based on weather, traffic, or executive mood index, whatever that meant. Carter loved Nora. He mentioned her by name in interviews. Nora doesn't get tired. Nora doesn't forget. Nora doesn't make decisions based on gut feelings. What he meant was, Nora doesn't interrupt. Nora doesn't challenge. Nora doesn't remember what happened behind closed doors. I was still in the building then, still observing. They hadn't removed me yet. Maybe they forgot. Or maybe they assumed I'd fade quietly. The way people expect old furniture to vanish when they redecorate. I stayed where I was, sat through meetings, took fewer notes, watched more. Our first real interaction wasn't dramatic. It happened during a Wednesday status meeting, one of those standing ones where people sip burnt coffee and pretend to care about dashboards. The agenda showed a client meeting with a Korean investment group scheduled for 10. Local time. I leaned toward Carter just before the meeting started. You may want to adjust that time. He didn't look up from his tablet. Why? That team usually arrives 15 minutes early. If you keep them waiting, they won't say anything, but they'll remember. He laughed lightly. Nora already optimized the slot based on their past 6 visits. She even considered cultural nuances. We're good. I nodded. Then I hope they're running late this time. He looked up at me briefly. You rely on intuition a lot. Don't you? I didn't answer that. Instead, I offered him a line he wouldn't understand until later. It's good if everyone's always on time. Carter didn't believe in subtleties. He believed in dashboards, in metrics, in concrete input that produced immediate output. You fed the system. The system responded. If it didn't, you adjusted the system. He once said during a strategy briefing, if a process needs human judgment, it's a broken process. That's when I knew. Not that he would fail, but that he wouldn't even notice when he did. People like Carter only recognize disaster when it becomes a spreadsheet. What he didn't realize is that I'd stopped taking notes. In the days that followed, I saw the signs, emails with the wrong salutations. Client preferences missed small ones. But telling, a French partner who always requested sparkling water got still. A Middle Eastern contact, who appreciated a personal greeting in Arabic, was addressed with a generic dear valued client. Not catastrophic errors. Just enough to plant doubt. I saw the flags but said nothing. There's a difference between withholding help and letting someone prove they don't need it. I gave Carter exactly what he wanted. Distance. The new assistants tried their best. They worked hard, and most of them meant well. But they didn't know the unwritten rules. Where to stand in a negotiation room so the senior partner gets the best light. Which chair creaks during long meetings. Which handshake means I agree, and which one means I'll think about it. They assumed success came from information. I knew it came from context, and that Nora couldn't download. Eventually, the room got quieter around me. People stopped looping me in. They assumed I was just still around. A remnant. Harmless. I stopped reminding them I was there, and in doing so, I became invisible, which, ironically, made it easier to see everything. The calendar invite came in at 6. On a Thursday. Subject. Quick sync, tomorrow. No agenda. No attachments. Just Carter's name. A room number. And a time. Ore. 15 a.m. I've seen enough endings to know when one's been scheduled. I arrived 2 minutes early. The conference room was already lit. A carafe of untouched coffee sat in the center of the table, sweating slightly in the chilled air. He was standing near the whiteboard, writing nothing. When he turned, he smiled like someone who'd been rehearsing it all night. Elena, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Thanks for coming. I sat, straight back, no coat off. He folded his hands. I want to start by saying how much we appreciate everything you've done. I didn't interrupt. There's no easy way to say this, so I'll be direct. We've completed phase 2 of the restructure. Based on system redundancies and role streamlining, your position no longer aligns with our core growth strategy. He waited. I nodded once. I see. He seemed surprised, like he expected resistance, or maybe gratitude. There's a generous severance package. He continued, and of course, we're happy to provide a reference. You've been a pillar here for a long time. I was a shadow, I said. Pillars get noticed. He smiled again, awkward this time. I hope you don't take this personally. I tilted my head slightly. I don't take decisions personally. I just remember how they were made. I left the room without another word. I didn't clear my desk. There wasn't anything left to clear. My files had been digitized, my folders reassigned. The orchid on the sill had started to wilt. I let it. No one said goodbye. Some avoided eye contact. Others pretended not to notice. That's the thing about exits, when they're quiet. People tell themselves it's just temporary. By noon, my access was revoked. No calendar. No internal chat. My name disappeared from the org chart like a typo corrected. The assistants whispered. Some offered polite smiles. One of them asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. I meant it. This wasn't the first time I'd been removed from a room I helped build. It wouldn't be the last. I took one final walk through the corridor that afternoon. Just once. Slowly. The hallway was quieter than usual. Or maybe I just wasn't part of the conversation anymore. In the elevator, I looked at my reflection. Neutral. Intact. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel regret. But I felt ready. What Carter didn't understand, what he never even tried to learn, was that removal isn't erasure. He thought he was cutting out a redundant piece of code. He didn't realize he was severing the company's memory. I didn't need to say goodbye. That would have implied I was leaving something behind. I wasn't. I took with me every whisper, every buried file, every handshake that meant more than it looked. I took the system behind the systems, the logic that Nora couldn't interpret, because it lived in looks and pauses and the seconds before someone speaks. I left a single note. Not to him. To no one in particular. Printed on plain white paper. No signature. I hope the cloud remembers to confirm when your partner changes their preferred greeting. I always did. I taped it to the side of the coffee machine. The same one that still had to be kicked twice to work. I didn't look back when I walked out. Again. This time, I didn't hear my own footsteps, but I knew they would echo. Eventually. 2 weeks after I left, I received a message. Not from Carter. Not from anyone still inside the building. It came from an old contact, someone I used to prep briefings for back when the company was still young enough to host meetings over coffee instead of catered sushi. The message was short. Heard you're free. We should talk. It was signed. Lucien Chang. Lucien wasn't just anyone. He was the founder of Stratuscore, a boutique strategy firm that specialized in high-stakes negotiations, particularly when tech giants began bleeding partnerships and didn't know why. He didn't ask me what had happened. He already knew. People like him always do. When I walked into his office, he didn't offer me a seat. He just said, "You held that place together longer than it deserved." I smiled. First time in a while. What do you want from me? I asked. Everything they forgot, you know? He didn't need to explain. He wanted my map of the unspoken. Who preferred to be emailed versus called? Which clients cared more about punctuality than polish? Which regions expected eye contact and which expected silence? Who shook hands with both hands, and who flinched at physical contact? That wasn't in their CRM. It was in me. I wasn't looking for revenge, but I was interested in precision. Lucien gave me both space and resources. I wasn't hired as a secretary. I was brought in as client dynamics consultant, a title vague enough to scare competitors, but real enough to close deals. For the first time in a long time, I had authority without noise. And then, the ripples started. I didn't cause the first one. Carter did. He arrived 7 minutes late to a virtual meeting with a Tokyo-based partner. Nora had optimized the slot, but not accounted for the cultural insult of tardiness, especially without apology. The partner never mentioned it. But 2 weeks later, they paused their rollout in 3 regions. The board blamed market hesitation. I didn't say otherwise. Next came the Zurich account. A senior client was offered a new portfolio manager with a shiny resume, but poor timings. She called during his Sabbath. Twice. He replied with a formal withdrawal and a brief note. Trust is not built through automation. Carter didn't understand the message. He sent a thank you email in response. I understood it perfectly. By month 2, 3 high-value partners had shifted strategic alignment, a term that looks clinical in press releases, but in boardrooms sounds like alarm bells. Stratuscore. Lucien's firm quietly absorbed 2 of those contracts. Not because we were cheaper, not because we had better tech, but because I knew how to show up 15 minutes early without seeming overeager, because I remembered the birthday of a CFO's daughter without needing a pop-up reminder. I wasn't sabotaging Carter's company. He was doing that all on his own. I was simply reminding people what it felt like to be understood without being profiled, heard without having to explain, remembered, not scanned. Then came the email. From an internal address. Someone still on Carter's team? Subject. Need a quiet consult. The message was cautious. Formal. But underneath it was desperation. One of their largest clients was requesting changes. Subtle ones. Timing. Tone. Sequence. Nora wasn't catching the nuance. The assistant team was burning out. They needed someone to translate the unspoken. Lucien asked if I wanted to respond. I did. We scheduled a casual sync with a mid-level liaison from Carter's org. Nothing formal. No signatures. Just a one-time consult. They said. I knew what it was. Reconnaissance disguised as humility. They thought they were bringing me in to plug a leak. They didn't realize I was the one who remembered where the cracks started. The moment I got access to the prep documents, I saw what they couldn't. The phrasing had shifted. The client was asking the same questions, but in a more guarded tone. The spacing between requests had increased. The replies were missing warmth, formulaic. Their relationship wasn't broken. It was dying quietly, exactly the way mine had. Over the next week, I offered suggestions, small ones. Switch that greeting. Don't follow up twice in the same thread. Add a sentence here. Something personal, but not familiar. Their client re-engaged, but not with them with me. They asked, off record, if I was back. I wasn't, not yet. Internally, Carter's team thanked me. Couldn't have done it without your context, one of them said. I smiled, but didn't agree, because they still didn't understand what I had given them. Context isn't data. It's trust, delivered slowly, remembered precisely, and never assumed. By the end of that month, 3 more clients contacted Stratuscore, not because we reached out, but because word travels in quiet places, just like I do. The call didn't come from Carter. It came from someone just below him, a name I remembered from compliance memos, someone who used to avoid eye contact in elevators but now opened with, "We'd love to get your insights." I let him finish the pitch. Then I asked, "Is this off the record?" A pause. "It doesn't have to be. I prefer that it is." The official story was simple. They were launching a new client interface, and early reactions were lukewarm. Nothing broken. Just off. Users weren't engaging the way projections expected. Unofficially, they had a problem they couldn't name. A missing ingredient they couldn't locate in code or workflow diagrams. They hoped I could take a look. I said yes, with one condition. I don't report to anyone. Another pause. Agreed. They sent me temporary credentials the next morning. The same system I'd been locked out of months earlier now welcomed me back like nothing happened. Familiar menus. Familiar folder names. But the structure felt off, like a hotel rearranged by someone who'd never stayed there. My name didn't appear anywhere on the directory. No one was told I was involved. And yet, within 3 hours, 3 emails landed in my inbox, all from former clients I hadn't spoken to since I left. Not a single one asked why I was back. They just said, "Thank God." I didn't fix anything directly. I just adjusted. A comma here, a phrasing shift there. Reordered a response thread so the client didn't feel like a ticket number. I changed the subject line on an internal update to something less clinical. And I made one phone call 6 minutes long to a regional partner whose silence had been misread as disinterest. He extended his contract the next day. No meetings, no bargaining. Just, if she's involved, I'm staying. I hadn't even stepped into the building yet. And that's when Carter called. His voice was steady, but his pacing betrayed him. I could hear the background footsteps. "Elena, I heard you've been helping out. Appreciate that." I wasn't helping, I said. I was observing. A pause. "Well, it's working. We're seeing signs of stabilization. Temporary," I replied. He didn't argue. That, more than anything, told me what I needed to know. "I'd like to bring you in officially," he said finally. "Not necessarily back into your old role. Of course, but maybe something more advisory. Flexible. Strategic." I let that hang in the air. Then I said, "No title. No badge. I'll come in under one condition, which is, I have access to everything." He hesitated. Everything. Full interface. Internal threads. Legacy comms. Partner histories. All of it. He exhaled. "That's unusual. So is recovering trust." He agreed. Of course he did. Not because he trusted me, but because he had no one left to trust. The next morning, I walked back through the front doors of the building I used to glide through unnoticed. People stared. Some smiled cautiously. Others whispered. I didn't stop. I went straight to the executive suite, logged in at a side station, and began downloading not files but patterns, missed pings, ghosted follow-ups, automated reminders that sounded more robotic than respectful. I wasn't there to clean up. I was there to trace the cracks back to their source. 2 days in, I requested a copy of the partner tier matrix, something I used to update manually, back when it was still printed and highlighted. It was a mess. Names misclassified, preferences outdated. Some entries had been auto-filled with public LinkedIn summaries. Worse trust indicators were missing. Those weren't metrics you could scrape. They had to be earned, logged, remembered. They were gone. So I built a new one, not digitally. I started on paper, 1 row per client. One column for things the system never thought to track. Preferred silence duration before big asks. Topics to avoid during Q3 calls. Coffee versus tea, yes. It still mattered. It wasn't a database. It was a language only I still spoke. Once it was ready, I didn't upload it. I took it to Lucian. He looked through it, whistled low, and said, "How long did this take you?" 17 years, I said. He slid it back across the table. "Let me know when you want to use it." Back inside Carter's building, I remained invisible on paper, but my suggestions started showing up in other people's updates. My phrasing found its way into client outreach, my tone low. Deliberate, respectful was mimicked, if not fully understood. Carter sent me one message that week. "Feels like we're back on track." I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because tracks only matter if the train is heading the right way, and I wasn't riding anymore. On the 10th day, I walked into the executive boardroom for a scheduled alignment meeting. Everyone was seated, even Carter. I wasn't introduced. I didn't sit. I pulled out a single folder, my client matrix, and set it on the table. "This is everything you don't know, you lost," I said. No one spoke. Carter reached for it. I didn't stop him. He flipped through 3 pages, then looked up. "I thought you came back to help." I met his eyes. "I didn't come back to help." "Then why?" I smiled gently, without heat. "To remind you that memory is not a feature. It's a responsibility." And then I left the folder there. Walked out. Not one person asked me to stay. But no one looked away. Carter requested a one-on-one. The calendar note came directly from him this time. No assistant. No middleman. No clever subject line. Just, "Elena, Thursday. Conference room 3C. Farce. 4 p.m. No agenda attached. Of course not. When I walked in, he was already seated. Alone. No tablet in hand. No coffee. Just him, palms flat on the table. Spine too straight to be comfortable. I didn't sit. He gestured, as if offering a choice. I didn't take it. Instead, I leaned slightly on the back of the chair across from him, enough to show I wasn't there for a performance. "I figured we should clear the air," he began. I waited. "I want to be honest," he continued. "It's clear now that a lot of what we thought we'd replaced was more nuanced than we anticipated." Nuanced. The corporate synonym for things we didn't understand until they broke. "I misjudged your role," he said finally. There it was. Not an apology. Just recognition. Late, but honest. He folded his hands. "You're aware that since your return, we've recovered 3 major partnerships." "Yes, and retention satisfaction metrics are trending up again." "Clients don't measure satisfaction," I replied. "They measure whether or not they feel expendable." He nodded slow, like someone piecing together a map they once dismissed as outdated. "I'd like to find a way forward," he said. "Something more formal. Maybe bring you into leadership, if that's of interest." It wasn't, and he knew it. "I'm not here to rescue what you broke," I said. He blinked. "Then why are you here?" I walked over to the far window, looked out not because I needed to, but because silence carried more weight when it moved. Then I turned back. "I came to remind you," I said, "that what collapsed wasn't an error in code. It was a failure in recognition. You believed relationships were transactional, that loyalty could be outsourced, that memory could be digitized." He opened his mouth. I raised a hand. "Don't explain," I said quietly. "Just listen." He did. "You thought trust was a plug-in. That context could be scraped. That timing didn't matter as long as the data aligned. But trust isn't scheduled. Presence isn't automated. And memory, real memory, is not a feature. It's the sum of choices. Repetition. Attention. Absence." He swallowed. "What would you have done differently?" he asked. I stepped closer, not to intimidate, but to close the circuit. I would have asked who built the foundation before I started remodeling the roof. He sat back, tired, or maybe just emptied. I didn't feel triumphant, only precise. This was never about revenge. It was about clarity. I reached into my bag and placed a small envelope on the table, unmarked, sealed. "What's this?" he asked. "A list," I said, "of everyone who left quietly because they weren't seen." He didn't touch it. Didn't have to. It would wait until he was ready. Or until things fell apart again. "Why give me this?" he asked. I looked at him, expression steady. "Because you still think I came back to help you." A pause. "Didn't you—" I shook my head. "I came back to show you that what you removed didn't disappear." He didn't follow me when I turned to leave. Didn't call after me. Didn't say thank you. But this time, he stood. And that, for Carter, was the closest thing to understanding he'd ever offered. I didn't submit a resignation. There was no need. You can't resign from a place you were never really rehired into. I simply stopped logging in. One morning, I let the system expire my temporary credentials. No messages sent. No documents left open. Just a soft severing. No bleeding. No broadcast. By the time they noticed, I was already somewhere else. Lucien poured me tea in a quiet room overlooking the city. "You didn't even tell me you were stepping back," he said. "I didn't step back," I replied. "I stepped away." He didn't ask why. He never did. That's why I worked with him. The truth is, I never wanted to be part of something that only valued me in absence. Carter's company had become a place where silence was seen as irrelevance, where intuition was a threat, and where history was treated like technical debt. He didn't fire me the first time. He deleted me. The second time, he tried to reinstall me as a patch, not as a person. I declined. 2 months passed, and then one morning, I received a box. No return address, no note. Inside was the folder I'd left on the boardroom table, the one labeled in my handwriting, the one Carter never returned. It had been copied, highlighted, annotated, but it hadn't been updated. That was the difference. I remember holding it in my hands and thinking, not with sadness, but with finality, they still don't understand. A former assistant emailed me weeks later, said she'd left, said the culture had shifted again this time towards synthetic personalization, whatever that meant. She asked if I was consulting elsewhere. I told her I wasn't. She asked if I missed it. I told her the truth. No. I miss being useful, but I don't miss being necessary only after everything collapses. She didn't reply. Some messages are meant to close, not continue. I walk more now, not toward anything, just through cities, through transit stations, through spaces that don't demand performance. There's a clarity in anonymity, a kind of grace in not having to hold up a system on your shoulders. Sometimes I stop in lobbies of buildings I once helped build, contracts I negotiated, relationships I initiated. No one recognizes me. That's the point. If memory lives in systems, then I am a ghost in every hallway. If memory lives in people, then I'm still here. I've been asked, more than once, if I regret staying quiet when I was being erased. The answer is no, because I wasn't silent out of weakness. I was silent out of certainty. People forget noise. They remember precision. One afternoon, Lucien invited me to a meeting with a new partner, someone who had just left a major firm after realizing their work had been absorbed into AI playbooks. He looked tired. Smart, but tired. "I used to be the person people called when things were about to fall apart," he said. I nodded. I was too. I told him. We didn't say much else after that. We didn't need to. Some people only speak in full sentences. Others speak in shared glances and long silences. We understood each other perfectly. I don't build empires. I don't tear them down either. I just remember where the weight-bearing walls are. And sometimes, when asked gently enough, I show others where not to lean too hard. Someone once told me that people like me never win. We just linger. I think they meant it as an insult. But to linger is to remain, and to remain quietly. Precisely. Without need for recognition is its own kind of victory. I was never a leader. I never wanted to be. But the people who underestimated me, who ignored the warnings, who overestimated systems and underestimated presence, they're not here anymore. And that's enough.